I mean, one of the things I think is really important if you're making stories for television or radio is that you understand the building blocks of the stories. And there are different ways to think about this. One of the things you don't want to do is you don't want to think about it the way that you learned in high school, which is in high school we're all taught that the way that you write is that there's like a topic sentence and then there's like the facts which fill out the argument. In broadcasting, it's completely different. In broadcasting, I think you have two basic building blocks, and they're very powerful, and you can use them as you will. And one is the anecdote. And an anecdote is literally just a sequence of actions. If you think of it as just like what is a story in its purest form? A story in its purest form is somebody saying, this happened, and that led to this next thing, and that led to this next thing, and that led to this next thing, like one thing following another. And some of the things in the sequence can be, and that made me think of this, and then I said this. Like there could be thoughts and ideas as part of it, but like one is leading to the next, leading to the next. And the power of the anecdote is so great that no matter how, in a way, like no matter how boring the material is, if it's in a story form where there's an anecdote happening, and then he said this to me, and then I went here, and then I came downstairs, and I thought, like, what the hell? Like, it has a momentum in and of itself that no matter how boring the facts are, like I'm trying to think like okay, there's, if you try to think like the most boring possible story, okay, there's a guy, and he wakes up and he's lying there in bed, and the house is very, very quiet, just unearthly quiet. And so he sits up, and he puts his feet on the floor, and he walks to the door of his bedroom, and again, just very, very quiet. Walks down the stairs, looks around, just unusually quiet. Now, like this is like what I'm telling you is the most boring possible fact pattern, and yet there's suspense in it. It feels like something's going to happen, and the reason why is because literally it's a sequence of events. Like this guy is doing this thing, he's moving from space to space. You can feel through its form that when you have one thing leading to the next, you can feel inherently that you're on a train that has a destination and that he's going to find something. And so one of the most powerful things you have to figure out is, like, do you just start with the action, or should you just start with the action? In general, you want to start with the action, or you often do. So that's one of your building blocks. The other thing that little anecdote has is that it's raising a question from the beginning. And that's the other thing that you want is you want bait. You want to constantly be raising questions. So in that little story, the bait is that the house is very quiet. And so the question hanging in the air is why? And it's implied that any question you raise, you're going to answer. And so again, that's another thing you want to manipulate. You want to be constantly raising questions and answering them from the beginning of the story. And that the whole shape of a story is that you're throwing out questions to keep people watching or listening, and then answering them along the way. Okay, so you have the building block, which is like the actual sequence of actions, the anecdote part of it. This thing happened, and then this thing, and then this thing. That's one building block. Then the other big building block, your other tool, is that you have a moment of reflection. And by that I mean, at some point, somebody's got to say, here's why the hell you're listening to this story. Like, here's the point of the story. Here's the bigger something that we're driving at. Here's why I'm wasting your time with all this. And one of the things that's very, very unfortunate for people who are launching into the kinds of jobs that all the people who are making video pods are launching into, one of the things that's so very sad, and it's like the bane of my existence, and it's the bane of anybody's existence who does this kind of work, is that often, you have the two parts of this, the two parts of the structure. You've got the anecdote and you've got the moment of reflection. And often you'll have an anecdote which just kills. It's just so interesting. Like, this thing happens and it leads to the next and it leads to the next, and it's so surprising, and so many things happen. You meet these great characters and it means absolutely nothing. Like, it's just completely predictable. It doesn't tell you anything new. And so that's one huge problem. And then the other huge problem is you got a kind of boring set of facts, or boring story, right? That actually, like, somebody actually has something kind of interesting to say about it. And so actually, I think a lot of us, when we're beginning, we get caught in the problem of, we know we've got something here. We know that there's something here that's kind of compelling, but it just doesn't seem to be coming together. And often it's your job to be kind of ruthless and to understand that either you don't have a sequence of actions, you don't have the story part that works, or you don't have a moment of reflection that works. And you're going to need both. And in a good story, you're going to flip back and forth between the two. Like, there'll be a little bit of action, and then someone will say something about it, and there'll be a little more action, and someone will say something. And that's really like a lot of the trick of the whole thing, is to have the perseverance that if you've got an interesting anecdote, that you also can end up with an interesting moment of reflection that will support it. And then the two together, interwoven in 3 minutes or 6 minutes or however long your story is, will make something that's larger than the sum of its parts.